Hey, Professor Davis here. Here we are with your topics checklist for sections 8.5, 9.3, and 9.4. You can think of this group of sections as somewhat of a transition, kind of moving on, though, with more of our hypothesis testing. Let's take a look and see what's in here. First, in section 8.5, we want to talk about doing a hypothesis test for the mean mu when the population standard deviation is not known. So in this section, we want to be able to use we want to be able to differentiate the methods of testing between sections 8.4 and 8.5. In other words, whether we want to use the normal distribution or the student's t-distribution. This is exactly like what we did in section 7.4 when we talked about how we can do confidence intervals for using those two different distributions. So I would refer you to figure 7.5 in section 7.4, and that will help us do that. And then we want to be able to perform a hypothesis test using the t-distribution, that hypothesis test for the mean mu. Now, a couple of points on that. We want to use the traditional method for this kind of hypothesis testing. To be able to use the p-value method for a hypothesis test of this type, we really need a computer to be able to do that. We can do some tricks on our graphing calculator to do the p-value method, but I would only ask you to use the traditional method and also omit the confidence interval method using the t-distribution here. And also, the built-in function of the t-test on the graphing calculator is a very helpful tool in doing hypothesis tests of this type. So you might want to take a look at that, very much like the z-test that we looked at in section 8.4. Now, moving to chapter 9 now. We're still doing the same theme of hypothesis testing, and we're going to stick with the mean in chapter 9. We're not going to do any more hypothesis tests on the proportions right now. And we want to take a look now at what happens when we want to compare two population means. So we're going to break this down into two parts. Section 9.2 you can omit. We're not going to cover that. Section 9.3 is about inferences of two means with independent samples. In other words, samples that come from a different group that are unrelated. So first we want to be able to differentiate between independent and dependent samples. Example 1 helps us to do that. And then we want to do a hypothesis test involving two population means, again, using the traditional method, comparing a test statistic to a critical value. So the only thing really new here is the new computation we have to use for the test statistic here. And we can also use our calculator to help us, using the two-sample t-test on the calculator. Works very well with this group of problems. And one thing I want to mention, we always want to have the pooled variance set to no, because as a practical matter, we really don't know the population standard deviation for many of these problems of this type. So we always set the pooled variance to no when we're doing these problems in our calculator. And then finally, in section 9.4, very useful section, here we want to complete hypothesis tests on the mean when we have dependent samples. So many times people will do a before and after test, so to speak. For example, you might want to have a group of people weigh in and then go through maybe an exercise program and see how much they weigh after and see if there's a statistically significant drop in their weight. That's what this kind of test helps us to do. So you want to use the traditional method again for this kind of test. And I did a StatCast that you can find at the class website in the StatCast area that really helps us find the test statistic for this hypothesis test fairly easily. So we don't have to do a whole lot of pencil and paper work with that, and we can focus on interpreting the results. So for practice exercises here, in section 8.2, we want to do problems 5 through 15, page 439. Section 9.3, we want to do problems 5 through 15 odd, and section 9.4 problems 5 through 17 odd. So there is your topics checklist for sections 8.5, 9.3, and 9.4.